What sign is your rising sign in your solar return chart this year? Hi guys, welcome back to my YouTube. It is your girl Honey. Today people, we are talking about how to interpret the solar return. Now this is how I personally interpret it because I feel like everyone's very different how they go about it, but this is how I do it personally. And before we even get into that, I want you guys to be fully aware that I have a website, honeysastro.com, where I do conduct readings, where I do have classes, courses, workshops, articles. I will link the blog page in the comment section below where you guys can read up a little bit more about the solar return as well. I actually am quite inspired to do this video today because I did have people type into the search tab in the last 3 months a lot about solar return. You know, what does it mean to have solar return Mercury in the 7th house? Or what does it mean to have solar return Venus in the 10th house? Like literally people have been typing in solar return. So I'm literally doing a video right here, right now, hopefully to answer some questions, but also for more in depth, check out the blogs on my website and you will see a lot more there. Anyway, let's get into it. So people, the solar return, what exactly is it? The solar is the sun. So the sun takes 12 months to go all the way around the chart and come back to its natal position in your chart. So if your sun sits at 10 degrees of Capricorn, for example, then the sun's got to come back all the way around until it hits the exact 10 degree. I advise my clients to always try and book earlier because when the sun reaches a square towards your natal sun, for example, I'm an Aries sun, so when the sun is in Capricorn, so 3 months before your birthday, that's when you should be doing your reading because there's likely to be some themes from the solar return chart that can happen already. But not only that, you feel that there is a change happening and you could be in more of a position to prepare for your year ahead. The solar return can happen the day before, the day during, or the day after your birthday. All right, it can happen on 3-day span. But that's very important to know because some people travel on their birthday or for their birthday. So if you were saying to me, honey, I'm going to be all the way in Miami for my birthday, I'm like, okay, but what day are you going to be in Miami? When are you going to be inside Miami? Because if I'm going to calculate your solar return chart, I've got to know the exact location of where you're going to be on your birthday, but on the exact time. That's very important for us to calculate things properly. Now you can calculate your solar return chart by literally just Googling calculate solar return chart. Personally, I use online database called Lunar Astrology. I absolutely recommend it. If you guys are trying to up your game in astrology, you guys are welcome to use my discount code, which I will put in the comment section below, but it's very affordable. I think it's like $8 a month to use, or you can buy it for the year, but it's really affordable and I 100% recommend. When it comes to solar returns, they go hand in hand with annual profections. If you're not sure what that is, I've got videos on it, and again, I've also got blogs on that as well. I will link it in the comment section below. The first thing I do when it comes to looking at someone's solar return is I actually look at their annual profections. The client is saying to me, hey, you know what, honey, I want to look at my year ahead. I'm going to be 32 or I'm going to be 21, whatever it is, whatever year they're going to be turning, you have to pull up the annual profections chart or at least know what house that year is going to be associated with. You then must discuss what that house represents. So for example, let's say this person is turning 21. The 21st year activates the 10th house, which is the house of public image, authority, parents, career. So that's going to be a major focus for them during that particular year, is how they're being represented, how they express themselves, and also what they're doing for their career. We're going to be looking at the ruler of that house. So if that house is ruled by Taurus, for example, that would then activate their Venus in their chart. So I'll then talk a little bit about Venus and how it's aspected in their chart. If it's going to be a good year or a bad year or a challenging year or a great year. I want to talk about how it looks in their chart. But usually the annual profections chart will coincide with the solar return chart. When we see someone who happens to have Venus as the activated planet, we then pull up their solar return chart to see where their Venus is positioned in their solar return chart. And most of the time, you know, if their activated house is the 10th house in their natal chart, their 10th house could be the rising sign as well, or we've got Taurus as the ascendant, or there's lots of planets in Taurus, or Venus is just a lot of aspects. So I would then begin talking about the condition of their Venus. Now their Venus could be in their 10th house now, or their Venus could be in their first house, but it would be in a position that tends to be quite strong and influential throughout that year. You must also understand and what all of the planets represent in the chart. So of course there's solar return, so you look into what the sun represents, right? The sun is the solar, it's the soul's purpose, and also essentially where we put a lot of our focus in the year. So when you have the sun, let's say in the 3rd house, for example, we're seeing that there's going to be a focus on mental stimulation, a focus on learning, trying new things, doing lots of reading, but there's going to be a need for mental stimulation. Mercury is going to be where we're going to place a lot of our interest in terms of communication that year. Venus will be where we have a lot of our personal pleasures put in place, where we spend our money, and also the things that we are likely to value that year. Every single planet has a purpose in the house that it's positioned in, and what you've got to learn is what that purpose represents in that house throughout the year. Also, aspects to other planets. I've written a whole blog on everything you need to know about the planets on my blog page. I want to also highlight how important the ascendant is. Yes, everything's important, but the ascendant tells us a lot about the year ahead. So let's say again, this person might have Scorpio as their ascendant this year. We know Scorpio to be transformative, psychological, powerful. A lot of the themes will be changes for that person throughout the year. The themes would be them trying to acquire some sort of power or control over themselves, as the ascendant is the house of the self. But in the natal chart, what house does Scorpio rule? So you've got to go back to the natal chart to see, okay, well, if Scorpio sits in this person's 2nd house, for example, we're seeing that there's going to be more themes around money. So that means the 2nd house is the rising house in the solar return chart. So that would then also indicate what's happening with Venus, what's happening with Taurus, what's happening with this person's money this year. But what happens is it all collides together every single time. And that's why I like to use annual perfections, because it's just another technique that just sits so well with the solar return chart. Now, once you kind of collect everything, so you've got the sun here, you've got Mars here, you've got this here, you've got that there, you then have to look at the transits and also the synergy between the sun and the solar return chart. So if that person's activated planet for the year in their annual perfections is Mercury, they are going to be highly affected by Mercury in regards to transits. So whatever Mercury is transiting through, if you put a transit chart with the solar return chart, or even a transit chart with their natal chart to see if Mercury's going to be making any personal aspects in their chart, got to mention this to the client as well, because that will also highlight what years, what dates to really put more emphasis on. So for example, if this was someone's Mercury year, that means they are activated through Virgo in the chart or Gemini in the chart. When you think about Mercury is communication, processing information, generating ideas. There can be a lot of learning that year, lots of themes around siblings, around cars, around commuting, around talking about different things, different types of conversations coming up. We can also look at work being a major theme this year, signing in a new contract. And that's when you look at the annual perfections. When you go into the solar return chart and you look to see, well, where's Mercury? What's happening with Mercury? That's where you get the confirmation or the rest of the story from what you found from the annual perfections. So if a client happened to have their Mercury squaring Neptune or conjunct Neptune, a difficult aspect to Neptune essentially, in the solar return, we might see that Mercury is intercepted this year, or Mercury is in the 12th house this year. So there's going to be issues around employment, issues around getting their ideas across or believing in their intellectual capabilities. Do you see what I mean? So the annual perfections always coincides really well with the solar return chart. And also when you're putting the charts together, the solar return charts with the natal chart, we can see if there's any conjunctions or any trines or squares to the solar return chart, to the natal chart, to see whether there's going to be some sort of tension or again even more focus. So for example, on my 31st year I became pregnant, and this was also a moon year for me in my annual perfections chart. So the 31st year is an 8th house year. The 8th house is about transformation, also new beginnings in a sense as well, but the moon being there, it's a major change, especially psychological. That year I got pregnant, I moved house, my emotions were all over the place. It was just a very intense year for me, but the focus was all things moon. In my solar return chart I was a Capricorn rising rising. In my natal chart, I'm a Capricorn moon in the 8th house. So that means the rising house was the 8th house that year. But that same year, I took on board so much more responsibilities because this is Capricorn as my ascendant. So this was a new beginning for me, but I also took on board a lot. There was a lot of pressure as well from my family at the time. When it comes to the rising sign or the rising house, it's pretty simple when it comes to predicting things. It's pretty easy to interpret your year ahead. It's very, very simple. But I love this method of prediction because it just always goes hand in hand with annual profections, and it's just easy to interpret. So again, when you are interpreting the chart, you must learn about the planets and what the planets through the houses essentially mean. But you want to kind of more so understand the synastry of the natal chart with the solar return chart. The ascendant ruler in the solar return chart is also very important as well, because that tends to also contribute to what your year is going to look like. So let's say, for example, you're a Scorpio rising in your solar return chart and you have intercepted 8th house, intercepted 2nd house. The ruler of your ascendant is in the 8th house. So you're going to have a year where you're going to struggle a lot in terms of trying to find your sense of power and control and feeling as though you're failing. And the thing is, and also got issues with money, because when it comes to interceptions as well, because these also come up in the solar return chart, those are energies that where we feel very held back in that year, and there's nothing that we can do to be more in control of it. It's just about coming to terms of acceptance and just letting the year do what it needs to do. And the planets that are also intercepted in the 8th house or the 2nd house, and especially having the ascendant's ruler intercepted in the 8th house, you can find yourself getting very frustrated with not being able to adapt to evolving the way that you felt that you feel that you're supposed to be. So it can just be a very dampening year. There's lots of different things to look at when it comes to the solar return chart. Like I said, I've written blogs about it, so you guys make sure you check it out. All right.